Here to discuss a interesting topic, more of a lighter topic, but I think something which is going to be interesting, I hope, which is the significance of birthdays. So I've sent around some people questions earlier this week. I was looking for some ideas of questions to discuss at this weekly class. So if you have things that you want to discuss, then please let me know. Shoot me a text or something like that, because I'm looking for different things that will interest people, different things. So while I was going around and asking people, so one of our students that joined us once, who's not here today, said, it's actually my wife's birthday on Sunday, so I'm not going to join, but I'm curious to know the significance of a birthday from the Torah perspective. And then I was like, yeah, it's a great class. So we actually dedicated it for his wife's birthday. And for those that want to dedicate future classes, feel free to reach out to me and we could do that. So the question over here is, what is the significance of a birthday? And I'm actually going to ask from a raise of hand, who here relates to that question? Or it's like, what's the question? What's the significance of a birthday? Do you relate to that question, or do you be like, of course it's significant?
It's knowledge.
Okay. It's knowledge. It's all good. So I guess the question that I'm going to ask you is, what do you think it's significant? And if you do think it's significant, why? And if you don't, why? Anyone have any thoughts? Why would a birthday be significant? Why wouldn't it be significant?
The day you were born. So, good day.
It's a good day. Why is that a good day?
You're on to enjoy, experience new things.
Okay.
Fulfill your purpose.
Fulfill your purpose. Okay.
God's purpose for you.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think it's significant. I think it's significant to also just appreciate the milestone of the day Hashem brought us and said, your mission starts now, and the faith that started, and that in everything that we do, we're still here another day, another year, another marker. So I think there's significance in that celebration as a milestone marker in life.
Marianita.
And that connection, well, I'm trying to actually make sure I make the right turn to your street, so I might hang up for a second. It's not easy to be here every year. We have to go through all of our ups and downs, and we have to navigate all the paths. And if we've completed our mission, it's our time. I guess it's our time. But if it's not our time and we're here, we should be appreciative of that. And I think there's that. I think the milestone is going back to.
So that's an interesting point.
I just around.
Getting a little cut off. So I'm going to write down. So Colin mentioned the idea of appreciating being born.
But yeah, it's probably like
equals new opportunity, right?
So our mitzvahs, others, planet, whatever.
Okay, totally spelling this wrong. New stuff. Okay. And then Connie said mission, beginning of our mission. And then if I understood you correctly, or BA is going to join us in a minute, if I understood her correctly, she said that maybe on our birthday, we're actually not celebrating our birthday per se, rather we're celebrating the anniversary of still being here. So it's just a marker of when we could thank God for another year. Nothing to do with the day that we were born, right? So essentially when I'm celebrating my 26th birthday, I'm celebrating this year's birthday. I'm not celebrating a day from 26 years ago. Rather, I'm celebrating that I'm going on to another year. So that's
Gratitude.
interesting. Gratitude, right?
And
Thankful for another year. So, okay, any other thoughts that we have here? And so far, we haven't have any thoughts of why we should not be celebrating birthdays. Any other thoughts? Anita, we're asking for thoughts of why we do or don't celebrate birthdays. So why is that a thing? Why should we or should we not celebrate birthdays?
Hmm, I can't think of any reason why we shouldn't. I think it's giving appreciation to Hashem for giving us the opportunity to be here and to serve our purpose to bring heaven down to earth in our lifetime,
Okay,
to do what is unique for us to be here on earth. So I don't know. Celebrating, I think we should do every day. I think every day is a
that's great,
renewal.
right? So Anita says, why not celebrate? Why not celebrate? Um, I hope for all of us that on our birthdays, we actually have in mind the reasons that went around the table today. If we could be mindful on our birthday, the reason why we're happy is because God gave us another year, and the reason why we're happy is because we have a mission to fulfill, and this is where it starts. I think we would be in a great place. Okay.
I would say, me personally, on my birthday, I I remember my mother. My mother passed away 30 years ago. And it's even before she passed, I would always remember, this is the day that my mother gave life to me.
That is
life.
great.
And that's, I get the goosebumps now, that, yeah,
That is
I'm so
great.
grateful because I think of her more than I think of myself
That
on my
is
birthday.
great. That is great. So that's another great point that Connie brought up, which is who should be celebrating? Should we be celebrating our own birthdays or should our parents be celebrating our birthdays, right? Are they celebrating the fact that God gave them a gift? Um, and that's something to celebrate. Welcome, welcome.
And we're celebrating being here.
So are we celebrating that, right? Connie just brought up another point, which is that our parents, or as parents, we have reason to celebrate our children's birthdays for a very different reason. Um, as my wife's family, they love to celebrate the birthdays of babies, even when they like turn 1 years old. And it's always like, but they don't even know that you're celebrating them. But that's not the point. The mom is celebrating the fact that she brought a child into the world. And that is reason to celebrate.
One of the most beautiful gifts God gave
Yes.
me was my children.
Yes, yes. So that's definitely true. Okay, so I'm going to we had about 3 or 4 reasons to celebrate birthdays. I'm going to suggest why we should not be celebrating birthdays. Um, and the reason why I feel like we shouldn't be celebrating birthdays is because why are you celebrating someone's life when you don't know the ending? Right? So maybe let's celebrate the passing, celebrate a person's life, celebrate a legacy. Someone affected this world, someone made a difference. But until someone's passes, you don't know if the fact that they were born is a positive thing or not. Right? Especially for ourselves, especially when we're younger. So we're kind of like making a marker saying we're so happy to be in this world and we're so happy to be given this mission, but maybe we're gonna do more harm than good, you know? Maybe 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 it's not gonna end up being so nice. So that's the question. The question here is our birth is really such a significant day, and should we be celebrating our life when we don't yet know the end of the story? I think it's a good question to ponder. It's a healthy question to ponder, as long as it doesn't put you down, as long as it doesn't get you sad. Um, if it's something that's going to give you a kick in the pants. I think we had once during our JLI course. So we saw that story of that scientist that was very involved in creating the nuclear, and he ended up there was his brother died, and he was mistaken for his brother, and there was an ad and there was a post in the paper about his death. I don't remember this
It's the guy
video.
did explosives.
Right, so he created explosives, and the headliner was the angel of death died, or something like that. And he realized what his legacy would be, so he created the the Nobel Prize, right? This guy's name was something Nobel,
You
and
did
he
it on him, or
and he created a Nobel Prize because he wanted to change that headline. He realized what that would mean. Interesting story. In any case, and interestingly enough, in Jewish tradition, we don't necessarily find celebrating birthdays so much. It's more or less a newish thing. If you look at a lot of other sects in Judaism, within Chabad, we definitely do celebrate birthdays, but in other sects of Judaism, many don't, to the point that some don't even know their Hebrew birthday. And what I mean by Hebrew birthday, I'll explain. So there's a legal birthday, which is I'm born on December 21st. But then there's the day that I was born on the Hebrew calendar, which is the 8th day of Hanukkah, right? Now, the 8th day of Hanukkah is always going to be the same day on the Hebrew calendar, but it won't be the same day on the English calendar. So in terms of my legal birthday, in terms of my passport, if you're going to the airport, I have to know what my birthday is. That's December 21st. But in terms of the birthday, which we'll talk about later, the significance of birthday, the holiness of a birthday, I would actually follow my Hebrew birthday more than my English birthday. In Jewish circles and religious circles, we would celebrate our Hebrew birthday more than our English birthday, which is why sometimes you'll see a child going to the airport, a religious child, and the guy's going to say, "What's your birthday?" And he's going to struggle with that, right? And it's kind of like a funny scene, like you don't know your birthday, but in reality, he probably knows his Hebrew birthday, but he's not necessarily familiar with his English birthday or his legal birthday. But there are people that won't even know their Hebrew birthday. And the reason is because they don't care. Like, what I could day I was born, what difference does it make? Right? They kind of know, relatively speaking, the year they were born, so they know what their age is, but it's different if they're 6 months older or 6 months younger. Like, who does it affect? And the concept of celebrating their birthday is just not a thing. And maybe it's one less thing for their husband to be worried about. Like it's just not part of their life. And there was an interesting story that I heard a first encounter of the story. There's a man in Crown Heights with the name of Chaim Baruch Halberstam. So he's a Chabad Chassid, and he actually came. He's a Halberstam. Halberstams are a very famous name, a non-Chabad name from other sects, and he came from other religious sects, and he had a cousin who was actually a Rebbe in Israel, and they were struggling with infertility. So his wife flew to New York to ask a blessing from the Rebbe. She came for dollars, and she stayed by the Halberstam's house in Crown Heights. And when she went by dollars, so for those who are familiar, you've seen the videos, Rebbe would hand out dollars. So each person would get $1. If you had something special, you got a second dollar. And when it came to her, the Rebbe gave her $1. The Rebbe handed her a second dollar and said, "This is for your birthday." And she had no idea what was going on because she was clueless of when her birthday was. So why is Rebbe giving her $1 for her birthday? And as it turned out, when she came back and she told the Halberstams about it, they pulled out her passport and they looked at her English birthday and her legal birthday, and they figured out what her Hebrew birthday would be. And it turned out it was that very day. So that was a nice surprise for her. But that's just an interesting contrast where you have two Hasidic sects, and one very much celebrates birthdays, and the other one very much doesn't. He couldn't care less about birthdays. And again, the question is why celebrate birthdays? Why is that a celebration?
Why not?
Why celebrate your life when you don't even know what you're gonna do with it? Right? You have an infant. So again, Connie had a good point. The parents could celebrate having a child. God gave them a child. I think that's a very valid point. I think that's something that they should definitely celebrate. But then fast forward 20, 30, 40 years and you're on your own and you're gonna celebrate yourself. And it's like, well, did you accomplish something that you're gonna celebrate, And or maybe celebrate that accomplishment. I'm sorry for being so sour, but I'm just trying to bring out what?
I think not necessarily celebrating yesterday, but celebrating the year ahead.
Right. So that's what I wrote down. You mentioned thankful for another year. So you're not celebrating your birthday, but it's kind of like a marker for a day to celebrate of God gave me another year. So that's an interesting point. Okay, that I like that point. So I'm
I always
not
think when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, this like really shows that Jews work on an annual contract. Always going for the renewal. So it's a good time to stop, reset, and think, you know what? It's another positive point forward.
okay, that's great.
'Cause I
That's
would-
great. Another Rosh Hashanah.
On my birthday, like I'll be 63, but when it's actually my birthday, I'm like, I'm starting my 64th year of life.
Yeah.
That's how I always look at it. Hey, I'm starting number 64. I
Right.
look at it as beginning, not an ending at my
Mhm.
63rd.
That's great. That's great. Um, okay, I want to talk about the biblical source for birthdays. Does anyone know if birthdays are mentioned in the Torah? Very good. Very good. So there is a birthday. What? Pharaoh, right? So any other birthdays mentioned besides for Pharaoh's birthday? So, so there's obviously days mentioned of people being born. That's mentioned. But in terms of celebrating a birthday, so there are only two celebrations of birthdays that I'm aware of. And the second one is not really a celebration. So or the second one's not really a birthday. So you are 100% right. The only one is Pharaoh's birthday. Um, Pharaoh celebrates his birthday when Joseph is sitting in prison, and that's when he takes out the two ministers that are there, the minister, the whiner and the baker, and he kills the baker and he puts the whiner back into his position, and eventually the whiner, the bartender, or whatever he was called, helped with taking Joseph out of prison. And many want to say, well, look at that. The only birthday mentioned in the Torah is someone who wasn't necessarily a very good person. Like maybe we shouldn't be learning lessons from him. The only one is Pharaoh. The other birthday that's mentioned is it says that after Sarah gave birth to Isaac, so some verses later, it says, Biyom higamel es Yitzchak, on the day that Abraham, higamel, whatever higamel means, Isaac, he celebrated, he threw a feast, he threw a party. And the question is, what was that day? What was he throwing a party for? And many say that it was his bar mitzvah. Okay, so many say that he turned 13 and he was celebrating his 13th birthday. So that's an interesting idea, which is that we're celebrating the day that he became a man, or the day that he became obligated in Torah observance and mitzvot, serving God, right? And I think that's a very, very valid point. So we're going to add another thing here on top of these four reasons, kind of connected to some of them, which is there's the spiritual birthday. And in that sense, right? In that sense, when I'm celebrating my birthday, I'm actually celebrating my birthday from when I was 12 or 13 years old, depending if you're a girl or a boy, right? You got that? So we have the concept of celebrating our child's birthday. We have the concept of celebrating our own birthday because that's when our mission started, or that's when we were born and we were given new opportunity, like Tommy said. We have the concept of celebrating my birthday of this year going forward, right? Like BA said, because I'm thanking God for another year. And then we have the concept of a spiritual birthday. the concept of I'm thanking God for giving me the opportunity to become obligated in serving Him, right? Which is 12 or 13, or if you're not Jewish, it's whenever you whenever you mature, right? At whatever age the child matures, that's when they become obligated in serving God, and that is going to be their spiritual birthday. Okay, so we do have some ideas of what a birthday is. We also have some ideas of why not to celebrate, particularly our first birthday when we were born. And that takes us to the next slide, which is, I didn't even realize that was the next slide, but that was about the spiritual power of the birthday. And no, so this is something else. Let's see. Okay, so here we go into what is the spiritual power of your birthday and what does that mean? So there's an interesting tradition, and the tradition is, it says in the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, that on someone's birthday, their mazel shines. What does mazel mean? Fortune, right? The other translations of mazel,
Well,
Good luck.
that word,
your luck,
I'm not sure that's the right word, but just something good that comes to you.
right? So what would that mean? Why would your mazel shine on your birthday?
Your uniqueness.
Your uniqueness. That is great. So the answer is, this is an interesting topic. Maybe it'll be a topic for itself. It's a very interesting topic, but we all have a mazel, right? When you say someone should have mazel tov, you should have good luck. What do we mean by that? So what it actually means is that there are spiritual energies out there, right? Or subconscious energies which affect us. Some things will make us more energetic or more tired or more prone to be more interested in this thing or more interested in that thing, right? Stuff that affect us from the outside that are not necessarily in our control that push us in a direction. And there are many things that affect us on a daily basis, including the day that we were born. So every day of the year has a mazel, which means that there's a certain energy which is stronger on that day. Every day of the week has a mazel. Every hour of the day has a specific mazel, which means that during that hour, it could be a good mazel or a bad mazel, and it will push us in a certain direction. So if I'm going in that direction, it will be easier to go there. If I'm going against that, it will be a little harder. I'll have to push away. So it doesn't take away from free choice, but it does play with my free choice a little bit. Some people are born naturally to be thieves, if that makes sense. They have a tendency towards thievery. That has to do with their mazel. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a great story of this child that was born, and he was a great child, brilliant, and he loved to do all the right things, but he had this incredible tendency for thievery, and everything from his father was very wealthy, everything was going missing, everything was just disappearing. And if the father would give him something, he didn't appreciate it. He only appreciated it when he stole it. But he hated that about himself. And eventually he told his father, he said, you know what? Let me change my scenery. Maybe if I go somewhere else, things will change. And he went to yeshiva. His father sent him off to a far off place. And a few months later, his father comes to visit him and he wants to know if maybe he's making trouble, what's going on. And he comes in and he walks into the study hall during the class and he sees that his son is actually sleeping. And he's like totally thrown off, like what, he's just wasting his time here. And then he goes to talk to the teacher and the teacher pushes him away. And whenever he seems like everything that he sees his son doing, it seems wrong. And then he walks into the study hall in the middle of the night and it's dark and quiet and there's a little candle in the corner and his son is sitting there and learning. And he basically, what ended up happening was when his son showed up to the yeshiva, he opened his heart to the Rosh Yeshiva, to the head of the school, and he told him, as a thief, you could steal things, or you could steal other type of things. You could steal time, or you could steal people's thoughts. You could fool people. And he said, be a thief in a good way. And therefore, he was the most discreet student. During the class, he would look like he was sleeping when really he was following the class. And then during the night, when everyone was sleeping, he would be sitting up and learning. And everything he did, he managed to use that tendency in the best way possible to use that discretion to his benefit. That he just loved stealing people's minds. He loved fooling people, and he did that in so many positive ways. Um, so yes, so going back to this idea of a mazel, there's this fortune that shines. Now, because on every day of the year there's a specific mazel, so on the day that you were born, you have a tendency, whatever that mazel is, that is connected to you, and you're going to have a stronger push or an urge or a naturalness, towards that idea. Now, if you're going to go through the year, when you come back to your birthday in a year's time, the same mazel will be shining. And therefore, obviously, naturally, you're going to be more of that on that day. You're going to have more of that on that, more of yourself, more of your own naturalness on the day of your birthday. For some reason, I'm not sure where this comes from, because on birthdays it says Mazal Goiver, your mazel is shining, your mazel is strong. The custom is to give blessings on your birthday, because we say if your mazel is strong, you have the power to give blessings. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it doesn't hurt anyone, so you might as well give blessings. Yes.
When I was in Jerusalem and I was bringing blessings forward, that was on my birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I
Very
didn't tell
special.
anyone it was my birthday that day.
Was it your Jewish birthday?
No, it was my
But still,
secular,
but
but still.
Regular, but that might be something, so we'll talk about this soon.
I do have to translate, and I wanna, now you made me curious to translate my bat mitzvah date too, at least to know what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Well, your bar mitzvah date is gonna be the same day as your Hebrew birthday. Essentially, meaning maybe you weren't bar mitzvah, maybe you weren't bar mitzvah on that day, but the day that you turned 12 is the day that you became obligated in mitzvot. So that, like my birthday.
But you're saying just even on whatever my Hebrew date is, plus 12.
Correct. So
Okay.
my Hebrew birthday is the 8th day of Hanukkah. It was in December, so my parents didn't celebrate my bar mitzvah on that day. We celebrated a month later, but I actually started putting on tefillin and got my aliyah on the day of my bar mitzvah, because that's the day that I became obligated in mitzvahs, whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What
You
is your
know.
Hebrew birthday? How do you calculate it?
So actually, if you search Hebrew birthday calculator, you'll find on Chabad.org. You could put in your English birthday, the date and the year that you were born, and whether it was after sunset or before sunset, because that will make a difference to the Hebrew date, and it will spit back the Hebrew date. Yeah. So another interesting thing about the mazel, something biblical, which I found interesting, is when the Jewish people fought Amalek, right? We heard of the nation of Amalek in the desert, and they came to fight us. One of the reasons why it was a huge threat was because they were very spiritual people. And because they were spiritual, it says that they chose their fighters, they chose the people that had their birthday on that day, because they wanted that idea of the Mazel Gaiver. They wanted stronger people that are less prone to die on that day. So therefore, all their fighters were born on that day, which is actually one of the places that we know this idea from, of Mazel Gaiver, interestingly enough. Okay, moving along. So that's just some of the power of the day of your birthday. Moving along, some customs that we do on our birthday. And again, why do we do customs? Why do we celebrate our birthday? Maybe we'll talk about that. We'll get to that a little later. But just to go through some of the customs, which is appropriate for a birthday. Some of them the Rebbe introduced many of them are traditional, going many, many years back. So one of them is the idea of a cheshbon nefesh, making an accounting of my life, stopping and saying, what did I accomplish? So it's not so much of a celebration as much as a day to think, was it a good thing that I was born? Am I accomplishing what I want to accomplish? Where am I holding? You always need to have those pointers, whether it's going to be a yearly pointer or a weekly or a monthly or a daily. There has to be, times that we stop and think, where am I holding? And a birthday is definitely a great time. Traditionally, this is not something that we do today, but there were many people that used to fast on their birthday because it was a serious day. It was a day of accounting. Maybe it was a day of atonement. So they would fast on their birthday, interestingly enough. In the same vein, it's a tradition to accept upon ourselves something new going into the future for the next year. I mean, in what way is my year this year going to be a better year, right? I turned 26 years old. Is that only on my passport, or am I actually 26 years older? Am I doing things? Am I maturing in my Judaism? Am I maturing in my connection to Hashem? So it's a time to take upon a custom, whether it's doing lighting the candles if we're not lighting the candles, or doing a Shabbat, or giving a little bit more charity, whatever it might be. Doing something for Hashem, enhancing our relationship, is definitely something to do on our birthday. There's the concept of saying Shehecheyanu, which is interesting. So Shehecheyanu is a prayer where we say, thank you, Hashem, for bringing me to this moment. So maybe this is kind of what BA said about being thankful. Thank you, Hashem, for bringing me here, making the blessing Shehecheyanu. So traditionally, we don't make the blessing Shehecheyanu just on a date. Similar to Rosh Hashanah, the tradition is to go and buy a new fruit, something that you haven't eaten in the season, or to wear a new clothing, something that you're excited about, and then you can make the Shehecheyanu on that, and also have in mind your birthday. So that is another interesting thing. Some other interesting traditions to do on your birthday is to get an aliyah, or if you're a woman, so your husband can get an aliyah for you, or your father, or anyone else that could have you in mind. The idea of an aliyah is aliyat haneshama, to elevate your soul, right? So you're going up a step in the ladder, you're going up a step in your mission in this world, your life, you're moving on. So that's definitely a good thing to do on your birthday as well, or the Sabbath before your birthday, that would be. To give some charity, to add in some prayer, to add in some study, make a party. Okay, make a party with your friends is also something to do on your birthday. So you know now that it's not just a thing to do because you're American, but it's also something to do because you're Jewish. There's actually, we know the book of Psalms, right? We're familiar with the book of Psalms. The book of Psalms has 150 chapters. And traditionally, every single person has a chapter which is meant for them. Which chapter is meant for you? The chapter of your age, but not of what you did, but what you are going into, right? So if I'm 26, then my chapter is 27. Okay, so when you're born, when an infant, their chapter is chapter 1. And then it grows from there. Every single day, I say a few chapters. I say my own chapter. I say my wife's chapter. I say both my kids' chapters. And then I also say the Rebbe's chapter, and the Rebbe's wife's chapter. And on our birthday, that's when our chapter changes to the next chapter, which is a day to study that chapter, to learn about that chapter, and to definitely read that chapter. If we're only going to do it once throughout the year, that's definitely a good time to know what chapter is my chapter in general. It's a good thing to know if you feel like you want to pray, you want to connect. Your chapter is definitely a good chapter to say in the Psalms. Okay, so I think we covered basically all the birthday customs. And then finally, moving on, so I mentioned the idea of the physical birthday as well as the spiritual birthday. I was ahead of myself, and that's why we mentioned that already. Okay. Just take a pause. Any questions? Are we good? How are we doing?
But
We're okay?
question,
Yes,
when you look
please.
up the book of Psalms, what book, are all like the Old Testament in Judaism? Because I was brought up Lutheran, so we had the Old Testament and New Testament.
So So you'll see the Psalms. The Psalms is one of,
But I mean, is there a certain, like, what I would call Bible? Not that they're, with
no,
all
so one of
the
the
Old
24
Testament?
books, one of the 24 books of the Torah, there's the 5 books of Moses,
Okay.
and then there's the prophets and the writings. So one of the books in the writings is called the Psalms. It was written by King David, and it's prayers to God.
Rabbi, can I, about the Psalms, you can get a separate Psalm book. You actually were all my Psalms. Everybody can get them either from Chabad, you can order them, and just for saying, I actually, with a Christian friend, read the Psalms with her, and they are different, but really say the same thing. So you can get a Psalm book, either go to Chabad.org.
Okay.
Right? So if you go to Chabad.org, you can also find it online very, very easily. If you
Yeah,
go
very
to,
easily too. Go to Amazon
you go to Chabad.org
or
slash
Amazon.
there's like a lot of Jewish texts, and there's the Bible there, of course. So you'll also have the Psalms there as well.
Yeah, and you don't have to
Um,
buy it, they have the whole thing online.
Yeah, the whole thing
Either
will be
way,
there.
like, if you want the book, they also sell them, yeah.
Chabad.org,
But
yeah.
that works.
Jewish bookstore in town, great now.
See, I actually like having
Yeah.
books,
Physical
that-
books.
the active opening up the book
Right,
and reading.
sure, sure.
Okay.
Great enough, Julian.
Okay.
Okay, so moving along, thank you for that question.
Washington?
So there's something else about birthdays, which I think we'll talk about a little later as well, but I don't know why it says it twice, not age. In any case, the concept of a birthday perhaps is actually the moment of renewal. I think we spoke about this in the lesson about sleep, what the idea of sleep is all about. And we said how the fact that God gave us a night and He gave us a morning, He gave us the opportunity to wake up, is an opportunity of renewal, right? And the fact that we have markers, we have Shabbat, and then we have Sundays, a new week. We have Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month. We have Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the year. These are opportunities of renewal. So celebrating a birthday is also celebrating or recognizing a day where we could change. We could become better people. We could click reload on our screen. We could start again. And it's definitely a thing to be happy about, a thing to embrace. That, it's not about my age, it's about the fact that I'm going forward. And there's actually a great story. I mentioned this in one of my weekly emails sometime back, that there was, I forget his name, but there was a Jewish senator or something like that in Canada. Does that make sense? Are there senators in Canada?
I don't know. But,
So there's some sort of Canadian diplomat, and he was a Jewish guy. He was very well connected to the rabbi at the Kotel, and he was celebrating his 80th birthday. So he invited him to celebrate with him, and obviously he couldn't make it. He wasn't going to come from Israel for that birthday. So he gave him a call, and he was going to wish him a happy birthday. And he said, like, what do you want me to wish you for? Like, what's your plans? And he said, I'm starting a new newspaper in Asia. So he kind of was taken aback. He's like, you're 80 years old and you're starting this new newspaper in Asia. And he told him the following story. He said when he was 50, so he kind of was going through like a midlife crisis. He became very, very sad. He told his wife, I feel like I haven't accomplished anything and I'm over the hump. And, what's going to be with me in my life? And he was very sad. So his wife said, I heard that there's this rabbi in Brooklyn and his name is Rabbi Schneerson, and people go to him for advice. So maybe head over to him, maybe he could help you. He wasn't religious in any way, but he picked up and he went to Brooklyn, he made a meeting, and he came into the Rebbe and he told the Rebbe his issue. And the Rebbe said, who was the most influential Jew in history? As far as you're concerned, who was the greatest Jew in history? And he said, Moses. And the Rebbe said, how old was Moses when he started his career? And he said, I don't know. And the Rebbe said, Moses was 120 years old. when he became the leader of the Jewish people. You know, presumably he wasn't Moses before that. Presumably he didn't accomplish anything before that. And Rabbi said, how was he able to do that? How was he able to pick up and change his life and to start something new when he was 120 years old? And the Rebbe said the answer is because he didn't look back, he looked forward. And the Rebbe told him, when you look forward in life, you're young. When you look backwards, no matter if you're 20, 30, 50, or 100, you're old. Looking backwards makes you old, looking forwards makes you young. And he said, that's my attitude. He said, I'm 80 years old. Sorry, my mistake. Moses was 80 when he started his career, not 120. That was a mistake of mine. He was 80. He passed when he was 120. 40 years in the desert, right? But he was 2/3 through his lifetime, and he didn't know how long he would live. He was 80 years old, and he started his career. The Rebbe said, don't look back, look forward. And that's definitely a message of our birthday, you know, not to be down. Very often people say, I'm not excited for my birthday, I'm so old. But if we look backwards, then we're old. If we look forward, then we're young.
Or they look backwards and say, I haven't accomplished anything, and they get depressed, but you know, they can look forward and say, I can change that.
Exactly, right? So that's we don't look backwards, we look forward. And finally, there is the concept of a day of gratitude, which was also mentioned, of course, right? God gave us life. We have that divine connection, and there's the opportunity for growth. The day of gratitude, thanking Hashem for this day, is definitely a special thing as well, and an important opportunity as well. Okay, what's the next point, which we also mentioned, is recognizing our purpose. So there's also the concept of realizing, I don't know if you've heard this line before, but it's a famous line that people say in the name of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe said, the day of your born is the day that God said, I cannot have the world without you, right? The day you are born is the day that God said, you are important, you're a piece of my puzzle. And the fact that there's another birthday that came around means that I have another day where I have to make a difference. It's another day where God needs me. Recognizing that I'm needed, recognizing that I was created with a mission, with a purpose, not just with a mission, but with a purpose, meaning I am needed. Without me, there's something missing. Without me, the picture is not complete. You know, that is definitely something to recognize on our birthday and to celebrate on our birthday. There's the joke. It's not such a good joke, but there's the joke of the guy that every year would throw a party for his birthday, and there would be this guy that would come, and he would always say, you know, you should have a great year, you should live another year. And finally he showed up and he finds out that the guy was actually 100. He said he should always live till 120, right? So he said he should live till 120, and he comes and the guy's 120 years old. So he wasn't sure exactly what he should say. So he goes over to him and he says, have a great day. All right. So that's not the best joke, but it's recognizing the value of another day that God gave us, or another year that God gave us, is definitely something to celebrate. Yes. From Moses, yes. Yes, from Moses, sure.
I would say 108, I have to change it.
Well, you could do 180. That's not a many. So Moses was considered the completest person. So that's why his age was complete, and that's why we consider 120 to be complete. Okay, now here comes the question where the Rebbe comes in and asks, and many of the things that we said were about celebrating, but many of them were not necessarily about celebrating as much as recognizing or being aware of. And the question is, why do we celebrate the day that we were born and not the day that we were conceived?
I was thinking
Some
about that.
couples do.
Okay. Yeah, I
Because
think that,
actually when I had said over the phone, that's when Hashem chose to bring us here, that's not actually true. Hashem made that choice 9 months earlier.
right? So many of the things that we spoke about, you know, being born, there's new opportunities. The new opportunities you don't get till you're probably 6, 7 years old. But when were you brought into the world? When did that start? I would think when you were conceived. You know, when did your mission start? Probably when you were conceived. When should you be thankful for another year? When did your life start? When did our life start? And so the only thing that is left is the spiritual birthday that we spoke about, because our bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah doesn't change. So the day that we become obligated in mitzvahs remains the day of our birthday. But why do we not celebrate the day that we were conceived instead of celebrating the day that we were born? Again, if it's about just like the custom, go with it. Why not celebrate, like Anita said? And you can celebrate both. But if it has a reason, and it's about making an accounting and about thinking about the year and thinking about what God gave us. So isn't the day that we were conceived a great day as well? And not only that, but the Rebbe points out that the day that we were born should actually be a sad day, because the transition between pregnancy and birth is not necessarily a positive transition for the baby in many ways, both physically and spiritually. From a physical standpoint, the baby has everything in the mother's womb. Today, we even know that there's a heart that beats in the baby. The baby is fully functioning within the mom, right? And it's being nourished, it's being taken care of, it's cuddled. The baby comes out and it's shaking, and sometimes you have all these complications, and the mother starts worrying, and you don't know if you're giving them enough food and not too much food, and it becomes all these issues when before the baby was perfect. There was nothing wrong. It was perfection, right? So wouldn't we be celebrating conceivement much more than birth? Birth seems to be a negative. And then from a spiritual standpoint, we know traditionally that when a baby is conceived, and a baby is in their mother's womb, there's an angel that teaches the entire Torah to that baby. The baby is incredibly spiritually connected, perhaps more than we will ever be in our lifetime. And then before we are born, the angel gives us a little pinch over here, which is what makes that indent. What?
Not a pinch.
Maybe a tap. Okay, maybe like a tap. There you go. And that, right? And the pain of that little tap makes us forget everything that we've learned, which is another reason why we actually console the baby when the baby is born. When a baby is born, a lot of the celebration around the baby traditionally is to console the baby, because the baby is devastated. It's like it's like someone going senile. It's someone that had all this knowledge and had this whole history and had this whole background, and they lost it all, and they're starting from day one. They knew all the languages, they were familiar with everything, and here they're starting fresh. Right? There's a reason why God does that, and part of the reason is because everything that we encounter in life, we're kind of reviewing it, so it comes naturally to us. It's not something that we have to do from scratch, which would be much more difficult to do. So no matter at the age that you're sitting and learning, studying Torah, it's all reviewing to you. You know it all. You've known it all. You're just refreshing your memory. But essentially, from a spiritual standpoint as well, the birthday is a very, very sad day. Okay? Joanne, you're with us on this? You like this? So this is the Rebbe's question. Why are we celebrating a birthday? Why is that something to celebrate? Why is that so happy? Why is that exciting? Could anyone suggest an answer to this question? What happens on the day of our birth that we did not have when we were conceived, which makes it worthwhile?
This opportunity
Which opportunity?
to serve God, to bring God to earth, to do
Okay.
whatever we're doing, like right, and there's a reason we're here, so it's the beginning of that.
Okay, so I'm just going to challenge that for the sake of challenging it. I could say that the beginning started when I was conceived,
They gave you the mission then,
right?
I mean, that they got,
Practically speaking, a newborn can't really do anything,
so they're not serving too much,
right?
except they're clever.
Right? So are they really making a difference, right? Right? Any other ideas? I don't want to shut it down because it's a good point, but I'm just trying to get something get to a finer line.
And it's not a puppy. I know.
Yeah. Anything else? Right? You know, as you could say that they made a difference because they gave their parents a child, so that's something that's special.
Opportunity for mitzvahs.
Right. So again, essentially obligation starts when we mature,
Yeah.
and the fact that we were created or conceived happened 9 months before. But there is truth to that, which is when we get to Yad Joanne.
What about the whole idea that, the baby is a soul and it has a soul? And the whole point of, if you go into the spiritual stuff, or even, I mean, I'm not that familiar with the Kabbalah, but basically the whole point is when someone passes, your soul is still up there and the three pieces of your soul.
Thank
And
you.
and the whole point,
Okay.
what?
Right,
I
but there's
thought-
definitely the soul. I would think that there's an aspect of the soul that exists in the baby even before coming into this, before being birthed, as well as,
Not a body, but the body's being built,
right?
but you could argue now that you had a body when you were in the womb.
I don't know. For me, Rabbi, can I chime in a second?
Sure, please, Lisa.
So I was born on Tisha B'Av. So for me, it's definitely, there's a reason for the destruction of the temple, but also I'm reminded that the
No, it says,
Mashiach is coming.
it says Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av.
Mashiach is coming, so it's good. But I just had to chime in for a second. Thank you.
That is great. But going back to Joanne's point, I would think that even if our soul isn't down here, so we mentioned this before, and we mentioned this on Wednesday, that there's different stages that our soul comes down to this world. We're not celebrating each of those stages, right? So it would be interesting to say that we're celebrating our birthday, but essentially, is that something good for the soul as well? And was there an actual change for the soul? Was something added for the soul during that day?
We're also celebrating legacy, next generation, your family and growth and.
That would be the parents
Yeah.
celebrating, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you can be celebrating too, for, you're the.
For your
next-
ancestry,
But
okay?
What's different after?
What's that?
Right,
The
why
question
not,
is,
why
what's
not when we're
different after
conceived?
what do you, what is?
Why not at conception? Okay, so I'm gonna give you the answer. And the answer is on the board. And the answer is the gift of ownership, or the gift of holding your own. And I'll explain to you why that's the answer. Because you could still struggle with this and ask me questions. It's more of a halachic thing, but halacha is the truth. So this is the real reason why we celebrate. And the answer is as follows. Torah says, the Talmud tells us that God gives us struggles. Why does God give us struggles? Why does he want us to struggle? Why can't it all be easy? Why can't he give everything on a
learn.
silver platter? What?
To learn.
Okay, to learn. But
Yes.
in truth, it's a gift. And why is it a
Yes.
gift? Because the Talmud tells us man rather 10% of his own earnings than 90% which was not earned. Man rather 10% of their own earnings than 90% which was not earned. The greatest thing that we can have is self-earned, self-created. It's mine, no one can take it away from me. I'd rather have less of mine than more of someone else's. When God gives us struggles, he's telling us, I want you to earn it. He doesn't give it us on a silver platter because he's giving us the gift of ownership. He's giving us the gift of saying, it's mine. Right? If we never had to struggle and we always made the right choice, that choice wouldn't be ours. The fact that we struggle, even if we make the right choice 1 out of 10, but the time that we make it, it's our choice that we made. It's our right choice.
Appreciate it more. Don't take life for granted.
Right? In Torah law, an infant in their mother's womb doesn't hold their own being. They don't hold their own person. They are a limb of the mother. An example of where this law would actually play out is if the infant is threatening the mother's life. So the question is, do we take the infant's life or do we take the mother's life? And the answer is we take the infant's life. And although infant life, and including life in infancy, is considered paramount in Judaism, right? We'll do anything to save a life, including the life of an infant. However, when it's threatening the mother's life, we'll take the infant's life. And the reason is because until the infant's born, they don't have a life on their own. But the moment the infant's born, if the baby, and this is a discussion in Jewish law, if a baby stuck their head out and then put it back in, and at this point we have a question, take the mom's life, let the mom die, or take the baby's life, we're not allowed to take the baby's life to save the mom, because they're just as important. Two lives are just as important. We don't take one for the other. We don't take a life to save the other life, unless one is threatening the other, right? But in the case of when you have a baby who already was born, even if they went back in, they stuck their head out, they went back in. There's different laws about that. If you heard the cry, this is a discussion. When are they legally born, right? This is a real discussion. At what point are they legally born? Even the head, is it when the nose comes out, when the mouth comes out, when the eyes come out? At what point are they considered legally born? But whenever they're legally born, they take on a being for themselves. They become their own person. And that's the only difference that happens on a birthday. Everything else, first of all, eating and drinking and all the nourishment and heart beating, life, they have it before. The spiritual ecstasy exists way much more before. And talking about being dependent, they're very dependent after as well. For many years, they're going to be dependent. In truth, for a lifetime, we are always dependent on others. We always need others to live, right? It would be very difficult to make our own clothing and make our own food from scratch and to build our own homes and to do everything. We're very much dependent on other people, on the people around us. So we are always dependent. That doesn't change. But the idea of I breathe on my own, which is the concept of being my own being. I'm not a limb of my mom, of my own person. This concept of ownership. Man wants one for themselves more than 9 of someone else's. That's what I'm celebrating on my birthday. That's the thing that's so exciting about a birthday. Okay, and I want to take a lesson from this, a very powerful lesson. Before that, I want to tell you about the spies. Sorry, I'm taking you back to the spies, but I actually love this picture. So I don't know if we discussed this in the past, but there's a very simple question about the spies, right? So are we familiar with the spies that I'm talking about? I think I brought this up once in the past. So the spies were sent by Moses into Israel to scout out the land. And they came back saying, we should not go. This is dangerous. This is a bad idea. The Jewish people got sad and they said, oh, we can't conquer it. And God got angry. You don't believe in me. You don't trust me. And he said, you're going to be stuck here for another 40 years until you guys die out. And then when you die out, I'll take the new generation into Israel. And the question is, why did Moses send the spies? And the question becomes even stronger because Joshua, 40 years later, once again sends the spies. Right? So 40 years before, spies were sent. They made this mistake. They were stuck in the desert for 40 years. And then 40 years later, they're about to go in. Just go in. Oh, we're going to send spies. That's a bad idea. Right? And thank God we didn't get stuck in the desert for another 40 years. Why would you risk that? Why would you risk that? And the answer, one of the answers, is absolutely incredible. One of the answers that's given is Moses sent spies because the concept of going into Jerusalem, going into Israel versus being in the desert is we are now going to make a difference. In the desert, we were in God's womb. We were being taken care of by God. God was laundering our clothing, he was feeding us, it was manna from heaven. Everything was being done by God. We didn't have to work at all. Even our faith was being nourished by God. We didn't have to nourish our own faith. Going into Israel means we're going to plow the land. We're going to have to make our own food. And our faith is going to have to be self-created. We're going to have to believe that God's the one that's giving us what we have. We're going to have to believe that everything is coming from God. It's not from ourselves, because on the face of it, on the surface, it looks like we're the ones that are doing it. And that's the purpose of going into Israel. The purpose of going into Israel is making it your own, which is why when God took us out of Egypt, we didn't fight for it. God did it on his own. When we went into Israel, we had to fight. God was the one that made the miracle happen, but we had a part in it. We made a difference. Or at least it looked like it, right? And that way we took ownership. And therefore said Moses, if we have to do it on our own, we have to send spies. Obviously, God could do anything, and he's going to do it. But if we have to do our part of our part is sending spies, and part of our part is seeing whether we could do it or not. Now, the spies made a mistake. They weren't supposed to come back and say we can't do it. They should have came back and said, God is going to do it despite all odds, but this is the best way to do it. That's doing our part. And in life, that's doing our part. We don't throw up our hands and give up.
But we're up against this.
Right?
We gotta prepare.
It's something we got to prepare for. And that was the job of the spies. But why did Moses risk it? The answer is because the prize of doing it on our own is so great that it's worth risking 40 years in the desert. And for Joshua, it's worth risking another 40 years in the desert for the prize of doing it on our own. And that's the message from the spies. And to take that home, the Rebbe says to take that home, that in our life, very, very often, it's very natural for us to wake up in the morning and think about what we have accomplished in life. What do I have? What did I build? And to become satisfied with that. Right? There we said that there's a guy that he's 60 years old and he went through the whole Torah and he feels very accomplished. You have a wealthy man that made a lot of money and he feels very accomplished and he's like, okay, I could retire. I could close shop. But like the Rebbe said, when you look back, you're old. And looking forward, what keeps us young. And the Rebbe said an incredible message. He said, if I wake up in the morning and I see all of this that I accomplished, all of this in my bank account, I have to see it as a gift of God that God gave me for today. And the question is, what am I going to do with that gift? If I let that money sit in my account, I don't do anything with it, then I am worth nothing. Because my worth is not what I accomplished. My worth is what I'm going to accomplish. The Alter Rebbe teaches us in Tanya that God creates the world every second. Every moment we're reborn. And the fact that I'm reborn with so many years behind me and children and a history and all these accomplishments, that's how God created me. God created me today with a history. But that history is not there for me to enjoy because it's not mine to enjoy. That's something that God gave me. Nothing from my past is my own. What's mine is what I'm going to do with that history. What I'm going to make of that history. And the same is true if our history is not so nice. Or sometimes we wake up in the morning and we don't want to get out of bed because I have an ugly history. Something happened and I'm not happy about. And I think the message is to tell ourselves, if I woke up with a memory that X and X happened and I'm not happy about that, God was the one that gave that memory to me this morning. I don't have that memory because of what I did. It's something that God granted me for whatever reason, because he thought it would make me a better person today. And the only question is if I'm going to get out of bed and do something with it. Am I going to fix my mistakes? Am I going to go about the proper actions that are going to bring me to the next stage, that make me a better person? And that's mine. What I could hold as my own Like on a birthday where we say, I'm not just part of my mom, but it's mine, is what I do today with my history. But anything that's part of my past is something that was given to me by God. It's not something that I can accredit to myself. It's not something that I could consider my own. And that's the message of a birthday and the lesson of a birthday every single day. To celebrate our birthday every day, to celebrate being our own, not to celebrate our accomplishments, but to celebrate that we could accomplish. To celebrate, what am I going to do today? How am I going to make a difference? Okay, thank you for joining me.
It's a very popular extent. Funny when you mentioned the moon thing. So every year, my mother thinks I'm nuts. So every year on my birthday, I call my mom. And I said, I just want to thank you. This many years ago, you had a choice and you chose life. And she's like, you're an idiot.
That's how I feel.
Like, I didn't have
think
to-
about my mother, what she, carried me and then gave birth and sustained me till I was able to do it on my own.
My mom said it's her holiday, it's not my holiday. She had the baby.
Right,
She had the baby, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
there's definitely truth to that as well, but now you have some other perspectives.
thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was
Thank you for
beautiful.
joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great job, Rabbi Levy.
Why the other perspective exists, like, how did that get so deeply rooted to not celebrate a birthday?
What?
How did it become so deeply rooted in other sects?
Cannot
to
celebrate?
Not celebrate,
Because it was never done.
because it just was never mentioned, never done.
There was never, it's very hard to find Torah sources of celebration of it. The concept of recognizing your birthday is something which is mentioned, but again, like I mentioned, more of a day of accountment, a day of looking back and seeing what I've accomplished. But the concept of celebrating it is
It's fresh from the Rebbe.
is more of the Rebbe's idea, and even the Rebbe, specifically in 1948, 1998, 1998. Sorry, not 1998. I'm mixing up. 1988,
Oh.
which was 6 years before you passed,
Mhm.
was when he introduced the initiative of birthdays. That's what he called it, right? So he had many initiatives. Putting on tefillin was an initiative, tzedakah, Shabbos candles, and then he made an initiative of celebrating birthdays. And even with kids, he would say, "Are you making a party? Are you having friends over?" He also saw it as an opportunity to grow in your Yiddishkeit. So discuss, why you're thankful and, how to grow and use that energy, like we talk about the mazel, that your birthday, your mazel shines. So use that energy to help others around you and to spread positivity and to spread light. So there's another point which I didn't mention, but the Rebbe mentioned this a number of times, that if life is about elevating the world, bring godliness into modernity. So if we live in 2025 in America and we're an American, and it wouldn't be socially accepted not to celebrate my birthday, then perhaps celebrating it with a godly twist is my way of fulfilling my mission of bringing God in this world, right? Like almost my birthday. And in a way, in that case, as I didn't mention this, but in a way, your legal birthday would almost go more in this vein, where, just like elevating food is elevating modernity, if I were to take a legal birthday, which is not a Jewish thing, and celebrate it in a Jewish way, bring God there, that's another opportunity to bring God into this world, to make a difference. So that's another
Yeah,
angle.
it's much more positive than a lot of other spins, just in general on topics, and wondering if that's the time of the Kabbalistic side. But there just seems to be more positive that, like, I always thought it was you weren't following something, you were not being respectful, not like you didn't know, or there's an opportunity to learn that what you didn't know.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Right.
I really appreciate that. A lot of what we study, you always bring that positive perspective to it.
I'm gonna say, I love your emails.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
Appreciate that.
yesterday I was like, did you read the latest email? And he's like, no, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna read it. We were driving in the car.
That's
And
great.
I missed your text message, so I am trying to think of ideas.
Okay, great.
So I didn't mean to not respond.
No worries.